Hello. I'm going to talk about a book. This one is nonfiction called Why Grow Up by Susan Neiman. Neiman, Subversive Thoughts for an Infantile Age. Why did I read this book? I read this book because she was a guest on the Glen Greenwald Rumble show a week or so ago. And with her new book about how woke is not really a left thing. So that was an intriguing interview. And I went to my library site and see if I could get that book, which is not available, or at least not available yet in the New York Public Library. So this one was, and I thought, well, I'll read that. And it has nice balloons. And I thought, why grow up? That sounds quite interesting. It sounds interesting. We do have an infantile age, and yeah, this is interesting stuff. It's not a self help book. Don't let the balloons fool you. This is a philosophy book, actually. And actually, it's a little bit heavy in a certain sense, in that it's very scholarly, and therefore it's a little bit over my little head. See, it's there's my head, and it is over my head to illustrate a point. So yeah, what goes on here? She does talk about how power wants people to be infantilized, how it serves power for us not to be all that well educated, to and always has served power for the people to be, kind of easy to manipulate, because they're not very educated or grown up or mature, and that they can be satisfied with, childish incentives to go on. And she talks about the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, which was, when was the Enlightenment? 1700s, so forth, the Age of Enlightenment, and talks about mainly about two writers, philosophers of the Enlightenment who advanced the Enlightenment and made the Enlightenment happen. One is Rousseau, and the other one is Immanuel Kant. And spends a great deal of time about talking about Kant, who and tells us that his books are, kind of unreadable by the average person, like very verbose, very long, and kind of difficult for the average person. I'm probably not going to end up reading any of that stuff. So what goes on is she talks about these two guys and what they feel about education. Rousseau is particularly interesting in that he has this book. What is it called? Email, Eimle, Email, or on education, which was in 1764. And it is all about how to raise a perfect child. And in this case, he was kind of raised in a sheltered sort of situation, and sort of naturally given to allowed to explore as he wished and so forth, and only see, now I'm going to have trouble describing all of what's going on here because I didn't exactly understand the whole thing, but pressing forward anyway because I decided to talk about all the books I read, whatever I have to say about them. So you're just going to get what you get here as usual. So he talks about actually, even though that he's talking about this book about this child who was raised in this really kind of special sort of way and privileged kind of way, and with a minder with him the entire time to watch over him. He has his own children. He has four children that he just sort of dumped into a orphanage to be adopted or whatever. So, there's real kind of conflict there, and really kind of weird, that people would do that, that there's such a gap between the thought and reality in that sort of way. So, it goes on to talk about how Rousseau affected the work of Kant and sort of softened him up in a certain sense. And what I'm left with, of course, I'm did I grow up? Yeah, she doesn't talk about any of the sort of practicalities of growing up. That's what makes it kind of not really a contemporary self-help book or anything like that, and more of a philosophy, because she's talking about these philosophers, but she doesn't talk about how so many of us who maybe didn't grow up so much, part of that not growing up was also not having children. And I think not having children is quite attached to the grow up or not situation, because I think that the demands of children, economic and attention wise and everything else, kind of pushes forward a person to maybe grow up in certain, the economic sense of having a good job, so forth. Maybe, not in other sorts of senses, but at least, having to take care of the young is a kind of a growing up kind of thing. I have taken care of young people. I had a period about 20 years ago, 25 years ago now, where I was minding a couple of baby girls, a friend of mine, and then that evolved into me working in a Waldorf school in early childhood, and I did not like the school experience, and so just stopped doing that. But the bit of just childcare with one-on-one or a couple of kids was really nice, and one of them in particular was just a lovely baby, and I had a wonderful time with dear Clara. So there's that. But otherwise, I did not really grow up, because I think something she covers in here, the models of growing up for me were not all that appealing. I mean, my dad was the grown up, I guess, and my mother, and they didn't particularly seem to like each other all that much. And he was working in a factory, like swing shifts all the time. One shift afternoons one week, midnights the next week, day shift the week after that, and this sort of revolving scale that went on for years and years. And that was not appealing to me. And I also was, I was a child of the 50s and 60s, where there were a big demographic bulge of people, and we sort of the culture sort of banded us together in a way, and it was. The famous yippie phrase, whatever it was, don't trust anybody over 30. Of course, the yippie leaders were both over 30, I think, at that time. But yeah, so growing up was not that appealing to me, and in fact, I didn't really grow up. You're talking to someone who doesn't really feel as though he actually grew up, and that I did not have any children. And beyond that, I also saw career and work as part of growing up, and I tried to avoid that wherever I could, and succeeded kind of, in the sort of criminal activity in the sort of light gauge way, which is kind of common. Uh, which puts me in the situation now of being in my 70s and still having to work because I don't have enough Social Security because I didn't pay into it enough to get, like whatever, $1,000 or 1,500 a month or whatever that I could live on. But as it is now, I cannot live on the Social Security that I get because I didn't grow up, I guess. So also she talks about the Simone de Beauvoir a little bit is also is in the one of the philosophers who she also talks about. And so it was a pretty interesting read. It was a little hard for me, and it was a little struggle because it was over my head, as I said. And so I don't know. You might want to read this book, but you know, whatever. Why grow up? I mean, the question for me now is why grow old? Um, when growing old without money, and when I get old enough that I can't work anymore, then what happens? So, as far as growing old, it is really not appealing to me, and I'm not really sure that I'm all in for doing that. There's that. But so I guess that's all I have to say about why grow up. And thank you for watching.